country where the year is not 2026. Where an active volcano has glowed without stopping for generations. Where churches are not built upward, but carved downward into solid rock. Where wild hyenas walk through city streets after dark and are welcomed instead of feared. Where some of the oldest human remains ever discovered emerged from the ground. This is Ethiopia. Most of the world has never seen it. It sits in the Horn of Africa, on a stretch of crust that is slowly tearing in two. The range is extreme. Dalal, in the northeast, sits 125 meters below sea level. Ras Dashen, far to the north, rises 4,550 meters into thin, cold air. Between those two extremes live more than 120 million people, speaking over 80 languages, divided into more than 90 distinct ethnic groups. Few nations on Earth contain this much contrast inside one border. This is land built from contradiction. The furnace. Northeast Ethiopia holds the Danakil Depression. Average annual temperatures here sit near 34 degrees Celsius. At ground level, midday readings regularly cross 50 degrees Celsius. By most measurements, it is the hottest permanently inhabited place on the planet. The ground glows yellow, then green, then a deep mineral orange. No paint, no filter, just chemistry. Sulfur springs bubble beneath crusted salt flats, releasing potassium salts and iron oxide that stain the earth in colors that look manufactured. They are not. This is one of the most active hydrothermal fields on Earth, sitting above a crust thinned almost to breaking by the same rift tearing the continent apart. Nearby, that salt becomes a livelihood. The Afar people have mined it here for generations, cutting slabs by hand from the crust of Lake Asail and loading them onto camels and donkeys. A single caravan can stretch for kilometers across open desert. The journey to highland markets takes days, through heat that can kill an unprepared traveler within hours. The salt itself, called amole, once functioned as currency across the region. In some communities, it still does. Then there is Erta Ale. Its name means smoking mountain in the Afar language. Since at least 1906, it has held one of the only permanent lava lakes on Earth. Most volcanoes erupt, then fall silent. This one does not stop. Molten rock churns inside its summit crater, day and night, decade after decade, visible only after a multi-hour trek across jagged volcanic rock in extreme heat. Some places make survival a daily negotiation. Few do it at this temperature, with this little water, for this many generations. This is land at its most hostile, and people still call it home. The roof of Africa. North of the Danakil, the land rises sharply. Cliffs drop more than 1,500 meters in places. Jagged basalt towers cut the skyline like broken teeth. This is the Simien Mountains, named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978 and home to some of the rarest animals on the continent. A troop moves across a high grassy plateau. Hundreds of individuals. Some grooming, some calling out in a rolling, almost musical chatter. At the center of each male's chest, a patch of bare red skin. From a distance, it looks like a wound. It is not. It is a hormonal display, brighter in dominant males, used to signal rank without violence. These are gelada baboons, and their herds can reach 600 individuals, among the largest stable groups of any primate outside humans. Higher still, on a near vertical slope, a goat-like animal picks its way along a ledge barely wider than a hand. One misstep would mean a fall of hundreds of meters. It does not slip. This is the Walia ibex, found nowhere else on Earth. Hunting and habitat loss once pushed its population below 150 individuals. Conservation efforts have since helped it recover past 1,000. Still rare, still endemic, still found only here. Overhead, a vulture with a wingspan near 2.8 meters circles, scanning for bones, not flesh. The bearded vulture, known locally as the lammergeier, drops marrow-filled bones from great heights to crack them open on rock below. It is one of the few birds on Earth that has built its entire feeding strategy around gravity itself. 200 kilometers south, the land rises again into the Bale Mountains. Here, on the Seneti Plateau, a reddish canid trots alone across frozen grass, nose low, scanning for movement beneath the soil. It hunts giant mole rats almost exclusively, one of the few canid species in the world specialized for rodent prey at high altitude. The Ethiopian wolf is the rarest canid in Africa. Fewer than 500 remain, scattered across isolated mountain pockets, each population cut off from the next by farmland, roads, and disease carried in from domestic dogs. Sharing these slopes is an antelope found nowhere else. The mountain nyala, spiral-horned, secretive, numbering only a few thousand individuals worldwide. Isolation creates rarity. Nowhere proves it more clearly than here. The river that fed an empire. From the highlands, water moves downhill. And one river out of Ethiopia changed the history of an entire region. Lake Tana, Ethiopia's largest lake, holds the source of the Blue Nile. From here, the river drops over a series of cliffs at Tiz Isat, a name that translates to smoking water. Before a hydroelectric dam reduced its flow in the 1990s, the falls released enough volume to throw visible mist hundreds of meters into the air, year-round. This river travels north, through Sudan, into Egypt, where it merges with the White Nile to form the river that built one of the earliest civilizations on Earth. Roughly 85% of the water reaching the Nile during peak flood season originates in the Ethiopian Highlands. Egypt's ancient agriculture, its pyramids, its entire early economy, depended on rainfall that fell on mountains most Egyptians never saw. A nation can shape history from a distance, simply by holding the source. The first ancestor. 200 kilometers east of Lake Tana, in the dry scrubland of the Afar region, a discovery in 1974 changed how humanity understands itself. A research team uncovered a partial skeleton, roughly 40% complete, embedded in sediment near the village of Hadar. The bones belonged to a small, upright walking hominin. Dated at 3.2 million years old, she was named Australopithecus afarensis. The world came to know her simply as Lucy. Her pelvis and leg bones confirmed something critical. She walked upright, long before the human brain grew large. Bipedalism came first. Intelligence came later. It rewrote the timeline of human evolution, and it happened in this exact stretch of dry earth. Decades later, in the same region, researchers uncovered the remains of a child from the same species, roughly 3.3 million years old, the most complete early hominin skeleton of its age ever found. Two discoveries, one valley, separated by a single research career. Ethiopia is sometimes called the cradle of humankind. The evidence is not metaphorical. It is buried here, layer by layer, in rock most visitors will never walk on. Faces unlike any other. Across the world, cultures use clothing to express identity. In the Omo Valley, in Ethiopia's far south, identity is written directly onto the body. A woman from the Mercy tribe wears a clay disc in her lower lip, stretched gradually over years until it reaches a diameter of 10 to 15 centimeters in some cases. The piercing begins in adolescence, enlarged with progressively larger plates over time. Its meaning has shifted across generations. Once tied to beauty and marriageability, now also a marker of cultural identity in the face of outside pressure to abandon it. Among the Hamar people, a different ritual marks a young man's passage into adulthood. Bare-chested, he must run and leap across the backs of a line of cattle 4 times without falling. Fail, and the attempt waits, sometimes for years, until he succeeds. The ceremony is called Ukuli Bula. Only after completing it can he marry. Along the river itself, the Karo people paint their bodies in white chalk, ochre, and crushed mineral pigment, geometric patterns drawn freehand, no two alike, often completed in under an hour before a ceremony begins. The Surma, further west, send their young men into ritualized stick-fighting contests called donga, fought with poles over 2 meters long. Injuries are common. Death, rare but not unheard of. Victors gain status among potential brides. Some say the contest settles more disputes than it starts. These are not museum displays. These are living systems, practiced now by people who have lived in this valley for centuries, largely undisturbed by the outside world until recent decades brought roads, tourism, and a dam that now threatens the river's natural flood cycle. But some places make even this look familiar. The village built to outlast its people. In the southern highlands, near the town of Chencha, a structure rises from the hillside that looks almost alive. Tall, beehive-shaped, woven entirely from bamboo and the leaves of the false banana plant, it stands nearly 12 meters at its peak. From a distance, its rounded form and tapering shape resemble an elephant's head, intentional, according to the Dorze people who build them. These houses can last 60 to 80 years. As termites slowly consume the base over decades, the structure is simply lifted, repositioned, and lowered again, extending its life by another generation. A single house can outlive the person who built it, then shelter their grandchildren. The material holding this entire system together is not a tree at all, but ensate, often called false banana, a plant that resembles its namesake yet produces no edible fruit. Its starch-rich pulp is harvested instead, fermented underground for months, then baked into a dense flatbread called kocho. One mature plant can feed a family for weeks. Unlike grain crops, it requires no annual replanting and tolerates drought that would destroy a maize field. Entire communities across the southern highlands have built their food security around a plant most outsiders have never heard of. 200 kilometers south, in the Konso Highlands, a different kind of permanence appears, carved not from wood, but from stone and memory. Steep hillsides have been terraced by hand for generations, retaining walls built without mortar, holding soil in place on slopes that would otherwise wash away with the rains. The Konso cultural landscape, recognized by UNESCO in 2011, contains terracing systems estimated to be over 400 years old, still farmed today using the same methods. Scattered among the stone-walled village compounds stand wooden statues called weka, carved to honor specific deceased community members of distinction. Generation poles, simpler markers driven into the ground, track the passage of leadership cycles, some recording lineage back more than 20 generations. Nothing here is written down. The land itself, the terraces, the statues, the poles, functions as the record. No road sign marks these villages. No major highway passes near them. Visitors who reach them must travel hours on unpaved tracks through farmland that has not changed its basic shape in centuries. This is not isolation by accident. It is a way of life that simply never required the outside world's permission to continue, but some places make even this look familiar. The empire that refused to fall. In Ethiopia's north, near the modern town of Axum, the ground holds the remains of an empire that once controlled trade routes from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. Between the 1st and 7th centuries AD, the kingdom of Axum minted its own coinage, traded with Rome, Persia, and India, and raised stone monuments unmatched anywhere on the continent at the time. The largest standing obelisk here reaches 24 meters and weighs an estimated 160 tons, carved from a single block of granite and somehow transported and raised without modern machinery. How remains debated among historians. What is certain, the technical precision required was immense, and a second, larger obelisk, taller still, lies fallen and broken nearby, suggesting the builders eventually overreached their own limits. Local tradition holds something more. The Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion, inside Axum, is said to house the Ark of the Covenant itself, brought here, according to legend, by Menelik I, son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. No outsider is permitted to view it. A single guardian monk, chosen for life, watches over the chamber until death. Whether the claim is literal or symbolic, the belief has shaped Ethiopian national identity for over 1,000 years. In 1936, Italian forces occupied Ethiopia, the only sustained European colonization the country experienced. It lasted 5 years. By 1941, Ethiopian and Allied forces had driven them out. With that exception, Ethiopia stands as the only African nation never colonized by a European power. Its monarchy, its sovereignty, and its written script all predate the colonial era by well over 1,000 years. This is a nation that measured its own time by its own clock for nearly 2,000 years. Literally. Ethiopia still runs on its own calendar, currently 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian system used by most of the world. The Ethiopian New Year, Enkatatash, falls in September. A day here is counted from sunrise, not midnight. Time itself works differently in this country, and has for centuries. The city built on faith and danger. In Ethiopia's Tigray region, a different kind of devotion plays out against open air. Carved into a sandstone cliff face roughly 2,500 meters above the valley floor sits the Church of Abuna Yamata Gu. There are no stairs. There is no path. Worshippers climb barefoot, gripping handholds worn smooth by centuries of use, crossing a final ledge less than 20 centimeters wide with a sheer drop on either side. Priests have made this climb for decades, carrying communion items, sometimes infants for baptism, across the same exposed rock face. No safety equipment is used. None ever has been. The church itself, once reached, is small, dim, painted with frescoes dating back roughly 600 years, preserved by isolation rather than restoration. Few buildings on Earth demand this much from those who simply wish to pray inside them. The walled city and the hyena man. Far to the east, in the city of Harar, a different kind of ritual unfolds after dark. Considered one of the holiest cities in Islam outside the Arabian Peninsula, Harar holds 82 mosques within a walled old town covering less than 1 square kilometer, a population density of religious architecture matched by almost nowhere else on Earth. But after sunset, on the city's edge, a man crouches in the dark with raw meat held between his teeth. Wild spotted hyenas emerge from the surrounding brush, drawn by a relationship passed down through generations of a single family. The hyenas approach. They take the meat directly from his mouth. They do not attack. Local tradition holds that feeding the hyenas keeps them from preying on livestock and people, a practical truce disguised as ritual, maintained nightly for longer than anyone now living can confirm. From above, the city looks calm, walled, orderly. Below, after dark, an entirely different negotiation is underway. The bean that changed the world. In Ethiopia's southwest, in the region once known as Kaffa, grows the plant believed to be the origin of coffee itself. Local legend credits a goat herder named Kaldi, sometime around the 9th century, who noticed his goats behaving erratically after eating red berries from a certain shrub. Curious, he tried them himself. Whatever the literal truth, genetic and historical evidence consistently traces Coffea arabica's wild origin to these highland forests. From here, it spread through Yemen, then the Ottoman Empire, then the world. Today, coffee fuels economies and habits on every continent. It began on this single slope. In Ethiopian households, coffee is still prepared as ceremony, not convenience. Green beans are roasted by hand over open flame, ground by hand, then brewed in a clay pot called a jabina. The process unfolds in 3 distinct rounds, each weaker than the last, each carrying its own name. Abel, Tona, Baraka. A single ceremony can take over an hour. It is not rushed. It was never meant to be. The city carved downward. North of Axum, at an elevation of roughly 2,500 meters, sits a town that does not look built. It looks grown out of the rock, or perhaps grown into it. In the late 12th century, King Lalibela ordered the construction of a new holy city, intended to serve as a substitute Jerusalem after pilgrimage routes to the original became dangerous. But these structures were not built upward from a foundation. They were carved downward into solid volcanic rock until 11 complete churches stood below the surface, accessible only by descending narrow trenches and stone passages. The most striking among them is Bete Georgis, the Church of St. George. From above, its roof forms a perfect cross cut into a pit roughly 12 meters deep. Every wall, window, and pillar was removed from solid stone, not added to it. There was no margin for error. A mistaken cut could not be undone, no material could be added back. Local tradition claims angels assisted the workers at night, completing in hours what laborers needed days to finish. No advanced tools have been found at the site, only hammers and chisels. The volcanic stone is soft enough to carve, yet hard enough to have lasted over 800 years largely intact. Pilgrims still come. Many walk for days, barefoot, dressed in white robes, to reach the churches during major religious festivals. Jenna, the Ethiopian Christmas, draws thousands into the trenches at once, voices echoing off rock walls older than most of Europe's great cathedrals. This single site holds nearly everything this country represents. Landscape shaped by extremity. History unbroken by outside conquest. Faith expressed not through scale alone, but through impossible precision. A calendar that still runs on its own time. A culture that built downward when the rest of the world built up. What remains? Ethiopia rarely appears on travel lists built around comfort and convenience. It does not offer easy access or predictable infrastructure. What it offers instead is depth. 3.2 million years of human ancestry, nearly 2,000 years of unbroken sovereignty, and landscapes ranging from the hottest ground on Earth to mountain ledges where ibex still walk undisturbed by human hands. Some places are ancient. Some are frozen in tradition. And one, deep inside a volcanic crater, is still burning, exactly as it has for over a century. Few places hold this much time, this much extremity, and this much unbroken identity inside one stretch of ground. What was witnessed here? The lava that never cools, the churches carved into mountains and cliffs, the wolves hunting at altitude, the lip plates and the cattle jumping rites, the man feeding wild hyenas by hand, is not a curiosity. It is a country that simply continued while much of the world assumed it had not. Click now to watch the places you want believe exist.